Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a call.
Members of the public?
I can't do it. I'm sorry. Okay. Peter, you're seated.
Thanks.
Draft minutes, any comments?
No.
Okay. Can we,
Motion to approve as written. Second.
all in favor? Madam Director?
Yes, short report this evening. We have hired Peter Ming as our applications coordinator. He started today, so very glad to have him on. He has a good background in the process of permitting. Most of his work has been indoors, so the fact of him getting outdoors and doing some inspections on the behalf of this agency will be new to him and something he is looking forward to. And then Jennifer Lumba, who is now Jennifer Urena, who was our intern last year, has been hired for the assistant compliance position, and very much looking forward to her coming on board next Monday.
Excellent.
It has been a long 6 weeks. Feels like more than that. And it is, for sure, as you all have seen from your emails, conference season. So we all have been out and about taking advantage of various conferences.
Okay, public hearing applications. 2019-024, 3 and 7 Hillside and 505 East Putnam.
I have a letter from Anthony DeAndrea requesting an extension for up until July 3rd, 2019.
So we just continue the hearing.
Yes, you can invite the member of the public to be sure that he's not here to speak to this, because as a public hearing, anybody would be entitled to speak to it.
Do you intend
No, I'm here for something else.
Excellent.
Maybe it'll
I'm
be,
not too early. I am.
actually, it would be easier if you just told us what you are here to talk about. And
Sure. Brian Miller is recommending us for
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Sorry, I didn't recognize you.
Very good. 47 Fairfield, Malone and McBroom for Greenwich Country Day School.
I-
I see nobody's here.
Nobody is here. So in the absence of people, perhaps we could take this time to read the information into the record while
Sure.
there's nobody here. Yeah, I think your staff report has the listing
Sorry.
document.
We have the completed application form with all of the regular supporting documentation signed by Greenwich Country Day School Headmaster Adam Rody, dated March 21st, 2019. The application plan set, I haven't counted the number of sheets, but it's on the order of 15 to 18. Prepared by Malone and McBroom Incorporated, certified by Daniel J. Krober, Connecticut PE, and dated March 22nd, 2019. Stormwater management report prepared by Malone and McBroom, certified by Mr. Krober, also dated March 22nd. Draft stormwater operations and maintenance plan, also Malone and McBroom, and this is actually under the signature of Megan Raymond, dated March 18th. Wetland and watercourse delineation report, prepared by Malone and McBroom, certified by Megan Raymond, who's a professional wetland scientist, and she is in the directory of the Southern, what is it, the SSSN?
Soil Society of Southern New England.
Right. That's dated February 27, 2019. A wetland impact assessment, also prepared by Ms. Raymond, dated March 22nd, 2019. The public hearing legal notice, which was dated April 4th, and DPW Engineering Division site review comments prepared by Scott Marucci, Senior Civil Engineer of our Department of Public Works, dated April 18th. Since that list was prepared, we have also received, there's been some correspondence back and forth with the applicant, and Director Sesto prepared a memorandum under today's date with extensive comments on the merits of the application.
Okay.
Oh, we should note for the record, members Perlin, Shundorf, and Benton were at the site today.
Right. Yeah. Do we have any comments on the consent approvals? 24 Paxland and 297 Cognawa. No comments? Okay.
Motion?
Can I ever remember, do we need a motion?
You do.
Motion to approve the two consent approvals listed on the agenda.
Second.
Peter seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, let's receive the application. Good idea. Can I have a motion to receive applications 1 through, oh my goodness, 21?
Now.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's done. We don't have to do that.
Really quick, we have signage downstairs. It's like
don't
prominently
need to do
displaying that we're up here today.
Yeah, it's posted in the clerk's office and on the website
Okay.
and on the agenda since the beginning of the year, yeah.
Just wanted to
Make
check.
a presentation
Just wanted to
downstairs,
check.
it'll be sent up here.
Yep. Sure.
All right. Larry, what are you here for?
Chairman, I'm here for item
101 Otter Rock.
item number 5 of the new application, and item 6, Susan Lyon.
I'm sorry.
I'm good. Thank you.
You're red of face.
Okay,
Son?
You doing Otter Rock?
yes, this is 101 Otter Rock.
Oh, good for you.
Um,
All right, 101 Otter Rock.
Wetland?
Okay, this single-family residence driveway modification, in-ground pool and pool house. Agency looked at this last month, and there were 3 main areas of concern that were raised. The drainage design, which was one of those areas, has been revised. Runoff from the entire house roof, rather than just a portion of the roof, is now directed to the stone reservoir under the porous asphalt driveway, and runoff from the pool complex will sheet flow across the lawn to the wetland. The drainage report has been revised based on some additional soil testing, and the indication is that runoff peaks will be reduced through the 25-year storm. DPW, since this report was written, has come back with comments on the revised plan. There are some revisions that are required. None of these are deal breakers from this agency's perspective, and will be addressed as a precondition of our permit, so I think we can move through the drainage, put this aside. Last month, it was noted that the basement showed a footing drain, and due to the topographic location of this house and the basement, that would have had to have been pumped. This concern has been eliminated, and also the concern about possibly dewatering the wetland with pumping so close to the wetland, because the new plan has a waterproof foundation with no footing drain. And the applicant, since last month, has provided a planting plan to enhance the wetland, and this plan seems to be appropriate species-wise for the site. I did note that the sizes of the planting stock are not in conformance with the agency's mitigation planting plan guidelines, so I believe there's a condition that they will be increased to in a revised planting plan. I recommend the agency require the applicant to install a permanent demarcation feature around the naturally maintained portion of the wetland and buffer. And that about wraps this one up in my opinion, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
You have no objections to anything that we've in the staff report, and we agree to it all, so.
Thank you. Any comments from the agency? Any comments from the public? Do you have a motion?
Are the conditions that you mentioned stated here, or?
The only one that, yeah, the condition one requires that stormwater to be approved by DPW, and the way this is printed is wrong. Condition 3 includes increasing the size to match the guidelines.
And the demarcation?
Demarcations in there.
Motion to approve.
Second. Jay has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Got that one? Let's do 20 Andrews Farm while you're standing there.
For the Bologna McBroom people, for Greenwich Country Day? Correct. Yep, so we've reordered the agenda while we waited. We finished up the first part quickly. So, okay.
Very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't have to panic.
Mr. Liebman showed up early, so we're giving him the
There's the
benefit.
reward.
He talks fast.
Very good. 2019-021, 20 Andrews Farm Road.
All right, this is the tennis court application. There were 6 areas of concern raised last month. The first was regarding the retaining wall that will reach 8.5 feet in height. There were no details for this wall, and even though it's well removed from the watercourse at 75 feet, it is upslope, and it's a straight shot down to the watercourse. If I thought it would be important for the agency to know how this wall would be built. Mr. Liebman at last month's meeting stated the wall would be poured concrete, and a detail as to this is now on the revised plan set. Okay, I did note that there's a general construction sequence on sheet 3. It doesn't reference the wall, so, maybe when you update the plans, be very specific as to this project,
On the
please.
final construction plan, Mr. Classi, that we stated that the wall will be constructed first, or after the installation of the road from the sedimentation.
Okay. The tennis court is going to be built on top of the existing well. There was no new well shown on the old plan. These revised plans show the new well is to be drilled east of the tennis court in a location that's over 100 feet from the wetlands. Third point, the town drainage manual requirements were proposed to be met by the hard true court, and it's the elevated rim of the retaining wall, which would serve to pond and infiltrate the stormwater. DPW in mid-March requested a meeting to discuss this in order to confirm the design would be compliant with the drainage manual. Mr. Liebman's going to have to update us whether that meeting ever occurred.
That meeting was booked, has taken place. I'm waiting for Mr. Marucci to send you guys the confirmation. We will confirm it. He has no problem with the harsh report as designed.
All right, so there is the first special condition covers final approval of the drainage as a precondition of the permit.
No
So,
objection.
fourth item was the survey accurate location of wetland flags, rather than the impressionistic wetland line drawn back in the 80s. Jim McManus, soil scientist, visited the site in early April. His flags have been added to the plan. They're a little bit different than the old delineation, so it's good to have that on the record.
And the soils report is in the file.
Right. And it was also pointed out that prior permits required a vegetated buffer for the wetland. Except, that really wasn't apparent upon site investigation back in March. The applicant now has come in with a planting plan that with a 35-foot average width buffer. The density of the plantings is per our mitigation planting plan guidelines. However, the size of the plants is pretty small, and the use of all of these small shrubs, I think, is not going to be as effective as having some sort of a mix of trees, larger multi-stem shrubs like amelanchier, and then some small shrubs with meadow maintained in between the woody plants. Again, there's a condition in here about getting a revised planting plan that conforms to these points, and if the applicant is agreeable, I think that would be the way to go.
No, we have no objection to the revising the size of the unit.
Okay, do we need to
And
modify?
the diversity, and the diversity of type.
Yeah, no, there's no objection. We'll, as part of the final construction
Sure.
plan, we will give one that will conform to the standard.
Very good. Bob, do we need to change any of the conditions?
No, it was in there, assuming that applicant would be agreeable to it.
Very good. Do you have any comments or questions?
Okay, and the final thing, number of drain pipes discharge right at the water course. Currently, those are going to be pulled back and put into a level spreader at some 25 feet from the property line, which will be a big improvement. So I have conditions of approval in here. I think Mr. Liebman has responded affirmatively to the points that were I was a little bit unsure of, so I recommend the agency issue a permit with those conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Bob. Very good. Any questions or comments from the agency? Any questions or comments from the public? Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Norma seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Enjoy. Are we back on track now?
We are.
2019-037, 47 Fairfield Avenue, Malone and McBroom for Greenwich Country Day School, athletic fields, accessory buildings, landscaping, retaining walls, and parking areas 5 feet from the wetlands.
I suggest that, I know our normal practice is staff describes the project, and I suspect the applicant is just going to go back and re-describe what we've just described. So if the agency would care to change things up and allow the applicant to describe, and staff can kick in afterwards.
Sounds good to me. Any comments? No?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Have at it, folks. That's always good.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Dan Thurman. I'm a professional engineer licensed here in the state of Connecticut. I'm associated with the firm out of the firm. Our office is located at 99 Wilkie Drive in Cheshire, and actually Megan and I are based out of our New Haven office for the address at 195 Church Street. So thank you for taking the time to listen to our application tonight. I'm going to walk through just a little bit of an agenda of what I'm going to talk about. First, go through the existing conditions. Megan, I'm going to turn it over to Megan. Megan is the soil scientist that delineated the wetlands and went through the impact assessment. She's going to speak to you about the delineation that she performed of the on-site wetlands. She's going to kick it back to me. I'm going to talk to you about a proposed plan. Then I'm going to give it back to Megan to talk about the impact analysis that she performed. We did get a couple staff reports that we're going to need to work with staff over the next couple weeks. So I anticipate that we'll have a little bit of work to do. It may be a little premature to address all the comments tonight, but we're happy to get any comments that you have. So as we work through the plans for the next 2 weeks, hopefully we can find a nice plan moving forward at the next meeting.
And Mr. Kroger, stop you for just a second. I think we ought to put in the record the visitors to the
I
site.
already named those when Bob read the information into the record.
Oh. Wasn't paying attention. Sorry, go on.
So,
please.
well, then the applicant should be aware that we had 3 members out at the site today.
Fantastic.
Right.
Great.
Is that turned on?
I won't be able to hear myself much, but, so here I'm going to present this is an existing conditions aerial photo. On this plan, we have highlighted the inland wetlands that have been delineated on the site. In addition to, in yellow, you'll see the 100-foot upland review area. So to orient everybody, north on this plan is straight up. In this location, we have Fairfield Road, which winds around the site. The main Greenwich Country Day School campus is up here, significantly higher than this site.
I think north is this.
You might actually be right. I think north is right, is that way.
Yeah, my comments will make no sense.
Yes, you're right. No, you're right. This plan, this is wrong. North is absolutely this way. Thank you. So we have Fairfield Road, the main campus, and then here is Cardinal Road. This is a private road. It's privately held up to about this point by the Greenwich Skating Club, which is located right here, and then at some point around here, it turns into Greenwich Country Day School property. Right now, the existing use of the site up to the north, up here, is up to the north and to the, now I'm confused, and over to the east is Greenwich Country Club, wraps around the site in this location. This here is Greenwich Country Day School property. In addition to a couple of these properties, there's one residential home that's owned by another owner here, just to the west of the property. Over in this location here, you have a few other residential properties, and then obviously Hillside Avenue, which goes up to Greenwich High School, is located right here. So in general, the site right now is used as Greenwich Country Day School's athletic facilities. Greenwich Country Day is a K through 9 school right now. As you likely know, they're going to be transitioning to a K through high school program with the acquisition of the Stanwich campus. As part of that, there's a need for expanded athletic programming. So they're looking at their program and trying to figure out how, between the existing Stanwich campus and their current campus, how they can handle the athletic program they're going to have. So the site right now, these grass fields are, they're nice fields for kind of the lower level, the K through 9 that's there now, more of a recreational use. There are 2 soccer lacrosse fields that are located side by side here now. There's a softball field, and they actually use this area for field hockey in the outfield of the softball field. And then there's the 2 baseball diamonds. This is their main baseball diamond in this location and a secondary diamond in that location. There is you could see that there's a fence limit that runs pretty close to the delineation of basically the top of bank. There's an existing fence that runs It's hard to see on this plan, but it runs basically around the entire perimeter of the top of bank in this location here. In this area here, there is a stand of pine trees, and there are some deciduous trees that run between the country club here. There is a beautiful stone wall that we're planning to retain that runs between and delineates the property lines here. Another stand of white pine trees in this location, and then an upland kind of vegetated area. This is a high knoll that rises up 15 to 20 feet in between the existing ball fields there now, and an existing bathroom, kind of restroom, concession building for the baseball field is located here. The site currently, Cardinal Road, currently stormwater essentially runs down Cardinal Road. It drains down into 2 catch basins that drain directly into the creek. There is a bridge, an existing bridge here that's coming to the end of its useful life. That bridge, you'll see in the plans, we're proposing to replace that bridge as part of this project. In addition, there is a small pedestrian footbridge in this location here that we also are planning to replace that pedestrian bridge with that. Utilities out to the site, like I said, drainage basically in Cardinal Road, this private road, just runs completely down the road and gets into these 2 catch basins, just discharges. This wetland, which Megan will speak about in a minute, right now is drains an under drain, a kind of cutoff drain that's at the base of the slope, discharges here. Water ponds in this area, fills that area up, and kind of flows down the road in a somewhat uncontrolled manner. If anybody was out there today, you probably saw that running through the backside of a stump that overtopped, and water just kind of finds its way. In the winter, it could be a little hazardous out there. The whole road, half of the road is pretty iced up. There's a water main that runs down the road, which is kind of strapped to the side, or it's in a concrete encasement on the bridge, runs and dead ends, serves all these homes. In terms of sanitary sewer, the Greenwich Skating Club has a force main that runs through the baseball fields, ultimately through the wetland and into a sanitary sewer manhole in this location. And there's also a pump station for the existing building here. The force main is strapped to the side of another bridge that goes over the creek in this location and ends up tying into that same sewer system. There's an existing sewer that runs on this side of the creek in this direction. So that's kind of the utilities. That's the general layout of what's happening. Before I get too much further, I'd love for Megan to walk through her delineation report. Yeah.
In terms of existing conditions,
Yep.
the surface of the field
Yep.
is fill?
Yes, there was, in this location here, there was definitely some fill placed here. I'm not sure when. Many years ago, there was certainly fill placed in that location.
And
Yep.
has that fill been tested? I know Malone Room is big on environmental.
In terms of environmental
Yeah.
contaminants,
Yeah.
it has not been tested for contaminants, no.
Is it going to be?
Yes, it will have to be, if it's going to be trucked off-site, which it will have to be tested, yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening. For the record, my name's Megan Raymond. I'm a professional wetland scientist and registered soil scientist with Milone McBroom, as well as a certified floodplain manager. I was involved with the project in the wetland delineated the wetlands and watercourses on the property, and then evaluated those wetlands and watercourses for the existing functions that they provide, and then as well looked at the existing functions in concert with the proposed activities to ascertain any potential impacts to these wetlands as a result of the improvements that we are going to speak about this evening. In general, what we're seeing, or specifically I should say, we have, there are 2 wetland resources on the property. This property in and of itself is about 25 acres of land. That's the focus. I guess per zoning, it's total of 41 acres, but this is an individual tax parcel, approximately 25 acres. Wetlands comprise a little bit over 5 acres, 5.44 acres of the site, or about 22%. These wetlands are comprised of Greenwich Creek, which flows south through the subject property, and then it flows south about 2 miles to the south. It confluences in Indian Harbor and then obviously Long Island Sound. The perennial Greenwich Creek corridor is fed by a little bit it's a little bit smaller than a 5 square mile watershed. About 4.22 square miles is the upgradient watershed to this creek. In addition, we have, which I believe is called colloquially Reynolds Brook, that feeds Greenwich Creek just south of the existing wooden footbridge that connects these two playing fields that Dan just mentioned. This drains about a 0.32 square mile watershed. So there's a steep, rocky, perennial watercourse that drains into Greenwich Creek just south of the practice field in the northern portion of the site. In addition to the Greenwich Creek corridor, we have a small, approximately 2,000 square foot isolated wetland that is located in the eastern portion of the property. In addition, just off-site to the east on the Greenwich Country Club property, there's another depression that exists, which is also isolated, that occupies approximately 4,000 square feet. Collectively, these areas extend an upland review area on the property, a little bit over 16 acres, 16 of the 25 acres, or about 64% of the site lies within the upland review area to these two on-site wetlands and the off-site wetland corridor. I'm kind of pinched in here, so I'm just going to move this over a little bit, give myself some room. In terms of vegetation along the top of the bank, as you can see from the existing land use as well as the landscape position, the fields occupy about little less than 10 acres, 9.88 acres of this 25-acre site. These are existing playing fields comprised primarily of manicured lawn with obviously some unconsolidated dirt in some of the infields here. Manicured lawn exists right up to the top of the bank of the Greenwich Creek. Greenwich Creek in the northern portion of the site, the riparian vegetation in this area is comprised of a snarl of non-native species, primarily porcelainberry and some Japanese knotweed, as well as some native stinging nettle herbaceous material along the creek proper. As you did describe, these areas are comprised. These fields are comprised of fill material. For the most part, they're mapped eudorthans per the Natural Resource Conservation Service mapping, and that was revealed in direct field investigations as well. The stream in this location, the northern 400 feet, is an incised stream, or in that the fill material of the adjacent fields, or the fields adjacent to the creek, are quite higher than the bed of the stream proper. As well, the practice field to the west lies about 9 feet higher than the fields to the east in this portion of the site. Once we move south, we have abutting single-family residences that front on Fairfield Road, and we're not seeing playing fields, obviously adjacent to the creek on both sides, with the exception of the northern 400 linear feet. In contrast, as you move to the south, though, we do have a thin woodland canopy that does border the stream and provides a lot of shading and some nice habitat as you move to the south. But the northern portion of the stream is quite open, quite exposed, and dominated by the non-native vegetation. The wetlands, as it relates to the isolated wetlands, this 2,000 square foot wetland on the property, and the eastern portion of the property is a broadleaf deciduous wetland dominated by just a thin canopy of red maple, a lot of kind of suburban understory of English ivy, some non-native winged euonymus, and Tatarian honeysuckle and the like. Not a lot of structural heterogeneity within this wetland system. Essentially, it's derived. There is some groundwater discharge that supports the hydrology here, but as well, we have some surficial, some overflow, stormwater flow from Cardinal Road, as well as the field under drains that exit and enter into the wetland at the northern portion of the site. Similarly, the off-site wetland is a little bit different. We have some mature maples along the western boundary. This area is a little bit more transitional than the wetland on the property. Functionality as it relates to Greenwich Creek, obviously we have some groundwater discharge, finfish habitat, production export, stream bank stabilization. Those are the primary features. Flood flow alteration. This area up into about the midsection of the stream where we have this bedrock controlled knob that exists between the baseball field and the northern playing fields is a 100-year FEMA mapped floodplain that I believe goes up to a little bit over elevation 56. As you move further south, there's a mapped floodway as well. The functionality of the smaller pedestrian isolated wetland relate to groundwater discharge, nutrient assimilation, sediment intoxicant reduction, basically the properties that you would see in a depressional or kind of an area that has some residence time. Hydrologically, this has some variable hydrology. We have some dry forest floor areas, as well as some seasonal saturation, and then some seasonal inundation that you see at this time of the year. You'll see standing water in this wetland, as well as the wetland off-site to the east. But then in the summertime, you'll go out and it will be quite dry. So you see a nice variable hydrology. The banks or the bed of Greenwich Creek, the channel itself ranges between, depending on where you are on the site, 4 to 10 feet. As Dan described, we do have the 3 wetland crossings. The structure within the bed is somewhat variable. There are areas that have some nice riffles and pools, but generally downstream. Within the northern 400 feet, it's quite linear, it's straightened, and we're not seeing a lot of structural diversity within the bed of the stream itself there. At this point, I've described the wetlands, their percentage of the property as they exist on the site and the functionality. I think we're going to turn it back to Dan to describe the proposed activities, and then I'll come back and describe the wetland impacts, unless you have any questions currently. Great.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, I'll leave it. I'm sorry, either Megan or Dan, if you can, I'm not sure if you've got a graphic that shows the floodplain and the floodplain that was delineated in your stormwater report.
Sure.
I think that'd be a helpful perspective while we're hearing about the proposed activity.
So in the plan set, the site plan, existing conditions plans, they delineate. So there's a floodway associated with Greenwich Creek, which is sort of FEMA mapped floodway. Is this corridor right here? It's this dashed line that goes up around on this side of the property, and it comes down and it cuts back on itself. It goes off of the plan here. We're not proposing any activities in this area. Obviously, we are doing a little bit of work in this corridor to basically renovate Cardinal Road. So right now, Cardinal Road does not meet the drainage standards, does not meet the width of a town standard road. Through our discussions with DPW, they requested, as part of this project, to bring Cardinal Road up to Town of Greenwich standards. So that's the reason why we are improving Cardinal Road through this area. So there is some work in this area that will be within the floodway. Essentially, we'll be matching existing grades. In that area, we will be expanding the road to add a sidewalk. Right now, there's no sidewalk on this side of the road, so we will be adding a sidewalk. But the extent of pavement through this area it matches about what's there today. So the grade and the limit of the road is pretty close to what's there today. Obviously, the bridge work will be within the floodway here, so we'll talk more about that. In terms of the 100-year floodplain, the AE zone is mapped by this dash line. So in this color here, so you'll see this area of our site we'll talk about is within the 100-year flood. And then that comes over here. Again, we're not doing anything in this area. And I'll flip to EX2. So now we're over on the north side of the site. Luckily, we have our north arrow correct here. But this is the limit of the AE, the 100-year floodplain. It ends right here at this point. And then, Pat, I think what you're referring to is that, so on the plans, we don't actually, on this site plan, we do show in our report, we did a large HEC-RAS analysis, a floodplain analysis. And we could certainly add that to the plan if that's something that So this area actually does, Greenwich Creek does overtop its bank currently, and that's delineated in our floodplain analysis,
So
which I think you're
just to
looking at.
make sure I'm clear as you go through your discussion. So what you've just pointed out is what FEMA had mapped.
Correct.
Then you all went in and did a site-specific study
That's correct.
to
Yep.
accurately
Mhm.
map what the floodplain boundary is. And so it's, when we get to this northern section, it comes out like 200 feet or so.
So there's an area that's somewhere in this area, and
More.
then it cuts off. We
Yeah, it
could
actually
certainly.
gets over by the baseball diamond.
So on the other side, yeah,
No.
the baseball field floods almost entirely on
I
a
just wanna
fairly
make sure I'm
routine
interpreting this
basis.
correctly.
Yep.
So this line here is the 100-year floodplain line based on your study. I think it's meant
That's-
to be this, and it just shows up as green.
Yeah, probably because of the underlay.
Yeah.
That's right, yep.
Okay,
The- So actually, the limit, I'm sorry, no, so the proposed, the existing is this line, yes.
Yes, okay.
So basically, the existing on the baseball field, the entire baseball field floods
Got it.
currently.
And then, say, 3/4 of the northernmost field and.
And a third maybe.
Two
Yep,
of the,
yep, that's about right. Yep,
Depending on where you are.
yep, it cuts through this corner here.
Okay.
Yep, in this area here.
So it comes down, it consumes that baseball
The
diamond.
baseball field
No,
is
the one that's
entirely
shown here?
flooded. Oh, the softball field.
Yes.
Yep.
It comes behind.
Yep,
the
it comes
softball
through
field,
here, yep.
Behind that, and then midway, and then
And it
tails
cuts
into where.
this way, yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. So we could certainly add that line to the,
I think that
to the site
you
plan,
did all
sure.
the work.
Yeah,
And a very
yeah,
important
yeah,
concept of
absolutely.
filling the floodplain. Yeah.
Yep, happy to add that, yep. Let me flip to our proposed plan. So the orientation on this plan is still the same, the north arrow towards me. So as we come in, and I'll kind of walk around in this direction. So as we come in on Cardinal Road, as I stated, we're going to improve the road to town standard conditions. We're going to put a new sidewalk along the road. There's a fair amount of folks that walk into the site right now. There's an existing parking lot right here that folks will park at and walk, down to here. I think some of the Greenwich High School students actually park down here and walk to campus. So the sidewalk will go in here. The road essentially stays where it is now, but it'll be repaved. Drainage will be improved. The bridge that'll be installed will be put in this location. The plan is for the bridge is to install that with as limited disturbance, obviously, to the creek as we'd have. We do have a detailed plan that goes through how we foresee building the bridge. Essentially, the existing abutments, the deck will be removed. The existing abutments on the ends of the bridge will remain. We'll pour new abutments on the outside of the bridge, new footings, and then it's going to be a precast three-sided box culvert that will be installed. So it'll be brought in several pieces, laid on the new foundations, and the bridge will be paved over the top with new retaining structures on the side of the bridge. And we could certainly go in a lot more detail about the bridge construction. Obviously, it's important that that's built to not disturb Greenwich Creek. As
How did you size the bridge? What flow rate is it going to take?
So the existing bridge passes about a 2-year storm. The proposed bridge will pass a 2-year storm. We have some significant issues in terms of constraints for putting this bridge in. We have a number of driveways. We have obviously a floodway here that we're dealing with, and we have we basically have to raise. We did look at alternates to try to pass larger flows, but the dimension of the creek is such that the road would have to get raised several feet to pass any significant flow underneath the bridge. So the plan is to basically match the flow rates that pass under the bridge right now.
And will you be submitting sketches of those alternatives considered?
Sure, we didn't submit those. If that's something that the commission would desire to look at, we could certainly prepare something.
Has that solution been reviewed with Public Works
We've been meeting for several months with Public Works. Obviously, the application's only been in for a few months, or a few weeks, since the March meeting. We did get comments from Public Works, which they have plenty of comments about the hydraulic analysis, about the floodplain analysis, that we need to sit down with them and work through that still.
And what's their response to the two-year flood on the bridge?
I don't think, they didn't, there were a lot of questions on, provide this and provide that. There wasn't a specific response to having a 2-year flow below the bridge. They've asked for more information. So I don't think they had a specific direction in one way or another.
So I'm sorry, you go.
So when you have a 3-year storm or 5-year storm, where does it flood?
So right now, it basically floods, and it's a one improvement that there will be. Right now, there's a solid concrete abutment, and the side, the guide rail is basically a concrete abutment. So that it basically goes around the side of the bridge. It'll flood, it'll go around the side of the bridge. The existing bridge design is such that the side of the bridge is open, so that if water does come up, it can actually flow over the bridge and through the bridge, rather than trying to scour and find its way around the bridge. So we think that's one improvement with the design of the bridge, is that it will be open and allow for flows to pass through it.
Yeah, I don't recall reading in the assessment any discussion relative to the size of the bridge, what the considerations were, those sorts of accommodations. That would be very helpful.
Sure, yeah, happy to. Yeah, in our stormwater management report, we do talk about the bridge, but we could certainly put something more succinct that'll respond to that more. I think through our comments with DPW, we're clearly going to have more information to provide at the next meeting.
And what is it about the existing bridge that renders it the end of its life?
The structural stability of it. It's spalled in locations. It's time to replace it. The sides of the abutment are such that it needs to be replaced. There's a lot of spalling underneath. There's undercutting on the sides. The concrete is not in great shape. So it's definitely, it's been on the school's to-do list, kind of targeting replacement of the bridge for some time. So it made sense as part of this project. We're going to have a fair amount of vehicles coming into the site. We're going to be replacing the road and upgrading the road to standards. So it makes a lot of sense to replace the bridge at this time.
Is there a report that includes the assessment, the technical assessment of what was found?
Yeah. A report of the condition of the bridge?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was submitted.
Yeah, I don't believe it was.
I'm not sure if it's in the stormwater report, but we prepared a bridge type study to replace the bridge. Right.
Yeah, this record should include that.
Okay. All right, so if I can move on to, so this parking lot here, as we move into the site, like I said, there's an existing parking lot in this location now, and about this area here. The plan is to expand that parking lot in this area here. This parking lot is proposed to be constructed out of porous asphalt with a stone base below it. Also, there's a bioretention swale, so basically the parking lot drains to the center swale. We're trying to promote as much infiltration in this area as we can. So that's the parking lot here. There's a batting cage for the baseball field that's being proposed here, because currently it's here, and we're going to be relocating that. So we're going to build the batting cage in this location. As you come in and you continue into the site, stormwater from this area of the site is proposed to cross slope toward a new rain garden. So the wetland that Megan spoke about in this area, this pocket wetland. Right now, you can't see it here, but there's a paved turnaround area right about this location here. And water just drains into this. We're planning to take that paved area out. We're planning to create a rain garden in this location, a shallow rain garden, to basically treat flow from the road, plant that up, and Megan will talk about that a little bit, plant up the rain garden, try to improve the water quality that's currently going in the space now, and revegetate in this area closer to the wetland, revegetate this space.
How close is the existing parking lot to the wetland? And how close is the new parking lot to the wetland?
Yep. So the existing parking lot, the area that I'm speaking of right now is this guy here. So this is the turnaround.
Yep.
So that area, a little handy scale, Megan.
I got a scale for you.
There it is. All right, so this is 30 scale. So the existing wetland to this area is about 30 feet. This parking lot here to the creek is located 25 to 30 feet away. This parking lot, we're actually taking and we're pulling back. We're pulling this parking lot out of the floodway in this location. So where it's 30 feet there, we're actually, you'll see here, this pulls back a little bit. In this location, this is a different scale. I want to say this is 60 scale. This is 60. May not be 60. Megan, that plan. So we're pulling the parking lot here about 10 feet further away from the creek than it is right now.
Yeah.
This is getting pulled back. In this location, we are, certainly this area of the parking lot is getting closer. Yep.
Looks like it's right on top of it.
Yeah, it's probably about 15 feet in this location. Yep. And this area here is getting pulled out away from the wetland. This is clearly getting closer to the wetland.
And how many parking spaces are in that lot, or intended
It's-
to be in that lot?
Yeah, it's roughly 50 parking spaces. I believe.
How did you come up with that number?
So we're looking to, so when I get to this, I can walk through how we're getting there, but, so we're proposing 3 fields, 3 fields with a stadium-type building. This building would have about 500 seats in it, up on top of what would be new team rooms, locker rooms. So students from Stanwich School, when they come over to this site, they would have the opportunity to change on site, to have the locker room facility. So there's 2 locker rooms built into the base of this building, and also 2 team rooms built into this building. So you could have a football game, and you have 2 locker rooms here. You also have the ability to potentially have a soccer game where you could have a soccer team changing in those rooms. So we've looked at kind of a traffic analysis of trying to figure out how much parking on an average day, how much parking on a peak day, and we're trying to balance, basically trying to get it so we have parking adequate for not your peak day, but parking for an average day where you have maybe a football game and a soccer game ongoing at the same time. We have enough parking to kind of handle that crowd. For the larger peak events, we have a plan to park on the Greenwich Country Day campus. When they have larger events, school is going to be out, and they have a lot of surface parking on the campus. So the idea would be to use the pedestrian connection down from the campus down into the site, and to use that. So not try to park all of the cars on this site, but make sure we have convenient parking for kind of the average day that we expect folks down on the facility.
Right, so it would be possible conceivably to reduce the number of parking spots and pull away from the wetland,
Conceivably, we just have more people walking from campus, correct?
which is good for them.
Yeah, walking is good. Yep.
Can you please, I don't recall in the submitted information, any parking analysis, what's driving the numbers here, what's available on the campus, all of that?
Sure, yeah, and I would think that's more of a planning and zoning, but if it's as it relates to the amount of parking, sure, happy to do so. So we talked about the parking lot here. There's a turnaround. Right now, there's no turnaround for fire truck access at the end of Cardinal Road. This would be designed such that a fire truck can come in, have a nice safe turnaround, where right now none exists. So that would be located here. Folks could come in, they could drop off, parents might drop students off at curbside and get access to the fields here. This is a space between the buildings where teams may picnic, spectators may spectate in this location for the softball field. So this is going to be a softball and field hockey field, just like it is today. You can actually see we're pulling back this green space. Here is the existing grass field. The limit of the field pulls back slightly from the existing limit of the field in this location, kind of the same over here. You can see the green space. This is the existing lawn area here. We're pulling back away from the creek in this location here. So all the field space is actually retreating back away from the wetland edge in both of these locations. Down in this location here, there is a proposed batting cage for the softball team, which will require the removal of some trees in this location here. This here is a small storage building that would store goals, netting, balls, all the sorts of things that you have in an athletic facility. So that would be stored in this area, maybe a gator, maybe a groomer for the fields. And then this is the proposed bridge here. So this bridge is being proposed to be raised to allow conveyance of more flow. So basically the 100-year storm, where right now that cannot pass under the existing footbridge, that will be able to pass underneath this bridge. So we see that as an improvement as part of these improvements. The abutments for this bridge would be concrete abutments installed outside of the limit of the wetlands. There will be some excavation, obviously. There'd be a need for dewatering of the trench, proper discharge of that water from those trenches, but there's no work proposed in the actual creek itself. And then this would be a timber bridge that'd be fabricated on site pretty quickly. I'd probably go in after the abutment's in less than a week. The bridge could be built. And that's a bridge over to an expanded, not expanded, really, there is a practice area here now. Due to the wet condition of water kind of leaching out at the toe of this slope, this area is fairly wet on a day like today, or a week after a day like today, it'd be incredibly wet and not really capable of being used. So this is a natural grass area now. The proposal is to improve the drainage, to install a small rain garden upstream here of the site to collect stormwater that comes down off the hill, and that would be then conveyed around the site and discharged to a plunge pool over in this location here. Again, the limit of work here on the downstream side is pretty similar to the existing field that's there now, so we're kind of staying within the footprint that is a field, but we are converting all of these surfaces to a synthetic turf material. The reason, I know there's been a lot of discussions about synthetic turf in Greenwich. Some of the benefits of synthetic turf are the amount of use that you can have on it, which for an athletic program, whether it's the high school or whether it's this school, there's a lot of kids in athletic programming now, which is great. For kids to be out exercising and using these facilities, staying in shape. But on a grass field, you should only use a grass field about 15 to 20 hours a week. If you use it any more than that, you're really going to beat that field up to a point where it's probably unsafe. It's rutted, and it's an unsafe condition. So the reason folks are going with synthetic turf is because you can play on that field as much as you can possibly play on it. As much daylight as there is, the field is going to remain consistent. The surface is going to remain consistent. In addition, the amount of rain that you get when you have a rainfall on a natural grass field, you could lose your field for certainly the day of, and absolutely probably the next day. You're going to lose practices, games. With synthetic turf, you could play, if you could bear it, you could play during a rainstorm, and certainly right after a rainstorm ends, you could play on the surface. So for almost every school that we're working with, this is an option because it provides consistency of the surface, and it really reduces the amount of delays, the amount of cancellations, rescheduling. So that's why synthetic turf is really gained a lot of traction on athletic facilities. We all love natural grass. It's a great surface if you can maintain it and you had, ample room for as many fields as you wanted so that you could rotate them around. Natural grass is a great option. A lot of times you don't have that option, and when you're looking for consistency of use, that's why we're going in this direction. So that is the kind of general overview of the proposal. And it might be a good time to have Megan walk through the impacts associated with this proposal. And then, of course, I'm sure you have many questions to ask and try to answer as many of those as we can tonight.
Mr. Greer, would you just go through what's required to put in synthetic turf?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you don't
Yeah.
go in and just lay it on the existing
Yep.
surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So in this case, so basically there's the synthetic surface. In this case, there will likely be a pad, what they call a shock pad or drainage pad. It's an inch material. It can be various materials. That's for shock absorption. It also has some drainage characteristics. So that pad goes directly beneath the turf. Beneath the pad will be a stone section. We call it dynamic stone. So it's an open graded stone. Might be an 1.5 inch stone. Allows water to travel through the stone, and that's why you get this great playability of the field, because water comes through, it infiltrates, and goes vertically down, so you don't have any ponding of water on the surface. In this case, what we're proposing is we do have fill to bring this site up. In this case, we'll have a level of gravel that comes in to create what we're calling subgrade, and then we have a large bathtub of that stone. We have 18 inches of stone going beneath all of these fields. The idea behind that stone is to have some storage of water. So we're basically using the stone below the field to store and detain the stormwater from the site. So basically all the water that comes through the site will travel directly vertically. You really have very little sheet flow on a synthetic turf field that has a good drainage base. So you're going to get a lot of water that goes straight down. It's going to go into this bathtub of 18 inches of stone. What we've done in this case is we've elevated. There's typically an underdrain system in that stone base. Typically, that underdrain is at the base of the stone layer. In this case, we've elevated the underdrain above the bottom of the stone layer. So what we're creating is a reservoir for retention. So water comes through, it sits in that reservoir, infiltrates into the ground, hopefully, and when the volume builds up in the stone, it'll fill up, and it'll travel into that underdrain system where it then travels to a collector pipe. So on the outside of the field, we have a pipe that runs all the way around, and it travels to an outlet structure in this location. So the bathtub fills up, the water travels to the collector pipe, and ultimately gets out to a discharge point here. Kind of the same idea here, except for we're actually pitching our subgrade on this field towards the middle of the field. So all of the water will basically travel through the surface, and it'll travel to the middle of the field where we have a pipe that runs down the middle of this field and ties into this drainage system and comes out in this location here. I should probably flip to the grading plan. I can show that. So this plan, you could see this is the system that I'm talking about. These dashed lines, this is our under drainage system that's elevated above the bottom of that stone reservoir. That connects into this dashed line here. That's our collector pipe, we call it. So basically the water fills up the reservoir, goes in that drain, gets into this collector pipe, it travels down and around, and we have an outlet weir in this manhole here. So we're basically trying to pond the water under the field. So water's not just traveling out from the field, we're actually using a weir here to trap water in the field, such that we can reduce the peak flow rates and the volume of runoff on site. In addition, some other BMPs that I haven't hit on are the parking lot in this location will travel through a series of catch basin structures which have typical 2-foot sumps. We do have a hydrodynamic separator proposed in this location, so prior to the water getting into this system downstream. We have a hydrodynamic separator proposed. And then we have a kind of storm tech or plastic infiltrator unit. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Basically running, so we'll discharge the roof water, we'll discharge the parking lot water through the end of this infiltrator system, which happens to wrap all the way around the field in this location here. So we have basically the parking lot, the roof, and then also the fields all tie into this system. The net effect of all this is the stormwater computations show that despite obviously having some additional impervious surfaces, despite having a synthetic surface which water travels straight through, but there is probably a little bit more runoff coming off a synthetic field because all the water goes down and gets into the drainage system. All of these infiltration, detention, retention systems, we're demonstrating that we have no increase in the peak flow rates or volumes for the two all the way through the 100-year storm event.
What sort of perk test did you perform in these areas for the underlying?
Yep. So we did a handful. The soils are not great. Soils do not have. We actually in our numbers we accounted for 0 infiltration into the soils. So there's no infiltration assumed whatsoever in our model, and we still meet all of those runoff
So
reduction.
I think it's 6 inches below the drains. You've got the 6-inch reservoir for the water quality volume. What's the residence time of that before it goes away?
Yeah. So that water will be gone within 72 hours. I believe we have that comp in there. If we don't, I'll make sure I get it for you.
Where does it go?
It infiltrates. The infiltration rate is not fantastic, but there are yes, there is some. Yep.
So how much do you have to build up the surface? How high does the surface
So it ranges.
over where it is now?
It ranges. So on this side, this is the 58 contour that comes through this field, this specific field here. This is the 58. This edge of the field is at 59.5. So this is about an 18-inch fill. Over on this side of the field, again, we've got a mirrored crown. So this is 59.5. And the edge of this is a 56 contour in this location. So this area is roughly 3 to 3.5 foot above existing grade. Over on this side, it's about the same. This is actually a little less here. This is a 60 contour. The edge of the field here is 60.5, so about 6 inches here. Again, this is that 56 contour. 57 is right about here, and the edge of the field here is 60.5, so it's about, again, 3.5 feet above the existing grade. The reason being is we're trying to keep the fields. Number one, we needed to build up some footprint so that we could store some water above the existing grade, which doesn't have great infiltration rates, so we needed some height there to do so. Also, as we talked about originally, this area does happen to inundate during larger storm events. So synthetic turf, you really don't want to be flooded. It's a problem if it gets flooded.
So you're excluding the floodplain, you're filling the floodplain here to
Well-
protect the fields.
So the area that does flood here, sure, we are filling that. We have demonstrated in our analysis. We've done a floodplain analysis. The HECRAS analysis that we've done shows that there's basically the floodplain elevation is not it does not raise, the floodway elevation does not raise more than 1/10 of a foot. And by the time you get down to the bridge, the water elevation is actually restored completely to normal. So there's no downstream impacts as a result of the filling of this area.
And I think the depth of the water in this area was somewhere for a 100-year storm was 18 inches to 2 feet in depth. And then there were even some areas where you had a 2-year storm event in this northernmost field.
What depth of water are you speaking of?
During a 100-year
The
flood event.
inundation of the field
Inundation.
itself?
Yes.
I don't have that exact number. I can pull it if you'd like. So in tables, so this was submitted with this big book of information, Stormwater Management Report dated March 22nd, 2019. probably more information than you all want to read. But the elevation of the water surface elevation, so for instance, at the footbridge number 2, depends which cross-section we look at. So I think cross-section 14,
So it looks like
I got to find the
at
cross-section.
1802 is at the footbridge to connect the fields. And then the next one upstream is 1854.
Yeah, let me find that.
And it was 2009 where it looks like the 2-year storm tips over into the field.
Somewhere in here. Which section are you in? I'm sorry.
It's just
Toward the
before
end of the book, right?
your subwatershed maps. Way towards the back.
Yeah, we have a map. I'm looking for the map that you have there. There it is. I found it. All right, so you're looking at
yeah,
transect
so-
1854 is at the foot. Let's look at 2009, which I gotta go back.
Yeah, 2009 cuts straight across the
That's
softball field.
just upstream. So the elevation of 2009, the existing water surface elevation is at 59.4. So that's in this location here. So, yeah, there's 18 inches of water here during a 100-year storm.
And it looks like even
This
the
location.
50 and 10 are pretty tight to the same inundation, surprisingly. Well, it's flat, so I guess it's not all that surprising.
Not sure if you have more specific questions than that. But, yeah, clearly there's this area does get inundated for sure. So if I keep just going around with the stormwater management approach, obviously low-impact developments in your town drainage manual. So we do think that we've met all the criteria for low-impact development. We submitted that in this book. Another low-impact development feature we have is this area here. This is another small rain garden on the edge of this parking lot here, in addition to a small rain garden up in this location, just upstream. I spoke about that one earlier. So that'll basically bisect some of the flow that's coming off the site here and route that around to this controlled discharge location here. And I can go through and then maybe Megan can take over. So I'll go through the different regulated activities that we have here. So we start down in this location here, regulated activity number 1. So this is the work to reconstruct the roadway, Cardinal Road. So that's this work here, just to reconstruct the road within the wetland area. So there's 0 square feet of direct wetland activity proposed there. In the upland area, there's 2,615 square feet. That's on this side of the wetland here. We go to regulated activity number 2, which is this one here, and that's the activities located in this location here. So basically, we're going to put erosion controls, obviously, for the parking lot. We're going to grade. We're going to put in utilities. We're going to put in these storm drainage improvements that we spoke of. We're going to reconstruct the bridge. And in that area, we have 0 square feet of direct activity, and we have 12,630 square feet in this area right here of upland review activity.
How can we replace the bridge with 0 impact on
So the abutments are basically being built on the outside of the existing abutments. and then it's a three-sided box. We will have to remove the existing abutments. There will be obviously some dewatering activities. There will be a turbidity curtain installed in the wetland, but there's no actual soil activity proposed in the actual creek itself.
But you will be playing in the creek.
We will have a turbidity curtain in the creek, and we will be working certainly on the embankment of the creek.
So there will be impacts.
Temporary impacts to replace the bridge, correct? Yeah. There's no soil being deposited into the creek. The abutments are being moved away from the edge of the creek, so there's no permanent square foot of impact actually
You're
within the
gonna put a
creek
box.
proper.
You're going to put a box in the street,
Box on the outside of the stream.
on the outside.
Yes, it
So
spans
nothing
the,
under the bridge changes.
no. Nope, it's going to completely span the bridge. It's a three-sided box that we put on the footings that are outside of the wetland, or outside of the creek, and then the box will be placed on top of that, outside of the extent of the creek. We go here to activity number,
Can I ask
yeah,
you a
go ahead.
question? 'Cause it
Yep.
came up in comments. Water handling for that bridge work shows that you are going to be able to keep the water out of the work zone for the 2-year storm.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you pick a 2-year? Is that a standard construction standard for a bridge replacement of this sort?
Well, the 2-year storm is what the existing bridge can kind of pass. That's the conveyance channel that it can pass now. So that's kind of the creek proper. As the creek fills up, as we know, it's going to go on the outside of it. So there's really no controlling it unless the creek was deeper, wider. So it's somewhat impossible to control storm events that overtop outside of the creek. As we get here to regulated activity number 3, again, this is for work proposed, I believe, in this location now. So this is to install the erosion controls, grading, utilities, storm drainage, all the same kind of stuff. And we have 65,000 square feet of activity within this 100-foot area. So a lot of the existing site is within that upland area there. We come over here to this activity, and actually these are the same. So we come over here to activity number 4. So this is for work along the kind of corridor. So this is the 100-foot area here. So basically everything you see inside the wetland in this dashed line here. So these are the improvements on this side of the bank. Again, we're going to install erosion controls. We're going to grade, as I stated. We're going to raise the grade. We're going to put in the drainage for the field. And we are going to put this building inside of that 100-foot area. There's no direct activity to the wetland, no activity within the creek. There's 100,200 square feet of activity within this limit here. And then finally, activity number 5 is over for this space over here. Again, the activities are within the existing playing field. Same kind of stuff. We're going to put in our erosion controls. We're going to grade the field. We're going to put in our storm drainage infrastructure. We're going to build up the field with the stone that we've talked about. Again, no square feet of direct activity. And between this line here, there's 33,100 square feet of activity within 100 feet of the wetland.
Does that include the watercourse that feeds into?
Yeah,
the front of
it does. Yep. Yeah, that's this entire section here. Yep.
Can you just go back to activity 2? Did that include the rain garden in that calculation?
I think that's activity 3, actually.
I'm
I think
sorry.
activity 3 includes the rain garden, yes. Yep, it does. Yep. With that, I'll let Megan talk about her thoughts on.
Sure. As we spoke of before, given the position of the 2 on-site wetlands and the off-site wetland, we're looking at an existing condition of 64% of the site is within the upland review area, or about a little bit over 16 acres of the 25-acre parcel. The work that Dan just described is comprised of just last 4.99 acres. We're proposing 4.99 acres of upland review area work within the review area to the off-site wetland on the Greenwich Country Club property, the on-site wetland depression in the east, as well as the Greenwich Creek corridor. 1 acre of this 4.99 acres is new activity. The majority of this work is taking place within the existing limits of disturbance to the existing athletic facility. So what we're looking at is really a modernization and an improvement of this existing use and condition. As we spoke of before, the riparian area to Greenwich Creek, there will be no additional encroachment towards the creek or bank side of the creek area. The majority of the work that we're looking at in terms of new upland review area disturbance pertains to the improvements around the isolated depression, the wetland depression to the east, as well as 0.18 acres of work up by the batting cages north of the northern field. There's a lot of activity that is proposed. There's a lot of work that is required to facilitate this project, but it was considered very thoughtfully and very proactively in terms of protection of wetland resources and protection of the watercourses and the function that they currently provide. One of the things that Dan just spoke of thoroughly was the stormwater management and the nature of the stormwater management in terms of the field under drains and the protection of water quality as it relates to the creek. Similarly, we're looking at the watershed to wetland 2. We do have this wetland is somewhat of it's fostered by and supported by stormwater currently. It's actively receives stormwater from Cardinal Road as well as the existing field under drains. What we're trying to do is maintain, obviously we're having some activities in close proximity to the wetland boundary of this stormwater wetland or isolated depression as well. But what we're looking to do is maintain hydrology as well as somewhat improve water quality by the creation of the rain garden to the east. The existing watershed to this wetland is it's a little less than an acre, 0.9 acre. That watershed will be slightly increased to 1.3 acres. I think that we were proposing the rain garden just east of the wetland boundary that will enhance this condition through the removal of the pavement, the little turnaround that we spoke of before. We're going to be removing that, planting a variety of native shrubs. It's kind of an interesting approach, actually, if you look at the grading plan in terms of the ability to berm this rain garden just east of the wetland boundary, allow that water quality renovation, water quality volume renovation, but still allow the communication in terms of hydrology. We did speak of the fact that this area allows uncontrolled overland flow to spill over Cardinal Road. There are conditions in the wintertime where we're seeing flooding conditions on the road and quite hazardous, unsafe condition relative to freezing of surface flow on the road surface. That will be improved by the installation of an outlet structure at the southern end of this wetland. The outlet structure is controlled by a subsurface weir and then a below-grade outlet that is positioned at approximately elevation 51. The weir is, though, positioned above the wetland boundary at 53.8, so we're looking at about 0.4 of a foot higher than the wetland boundary. There was some discussion, I think, that we can talk to staff about in terms of a detail on that and looking at a perforated subbase and the potential to drain this wetland. There's some confusion as to that currently, but there will be with the stormwater management design, there's no potential for the draining of this wetland. And we considered this quite specifically with an acknowledgement and an action to maintain this hydrology and to enhance through the installation of these native plantings between the existing road line of Cardinal Road and the wetland boundary proper. As we talked about before, the bedrock knoll to the west is going to be maintained. Cardinal Road as it exists now? Yeah.
While we're talking about that rain garden, this is what I was looking at. So this is the rain garden.
Right, that's not that rain garden. This is the rain garden. That's the one to the west of west of the stone wall and west of the off-site wetland. What we're looking at, what you want to look at for the detail on this one is, it's cold over on this side, is this is the structure, the outlet control structure for that.
So where's the detail of the rain garden itself?
The detail of the rain garden itself is going to be on the grading plan, correct? And again, there was a lot of, I just wanted to point that out specifically in terms of our acknowledgement that I mean, the comments that we received from you obviously came in quite late. I'm just addressing that one
Yep.
specifically because it was a point that we purposely designed to in terms of maintaining hydrology, protecting water quality through the addressing of the water retention and renovation of water quality volume, and then allowing outlet control at the southern end that would improve the existing overland stormwater flow onto Cardinal Road. The actual fate of that, any discharge from that wetland would get picked up by the proposed improvements within Cardinal Road that I think we did speak upon, which are the 5 catch basins and then the hydrodynamic separator that is going to be installed right at the proposed bridge. In addition to the stormwater quality, or the stormwater management protocol, obviously we have a robust and comprehensive sedimentation and erosion control and phasing plan that will be implemented during construction to avoid any temporary impacts. And between the two, we're looking to address temporary impacts during construction, long-term water quality maintenance through stormwater management. We did take a look at potential alternatives to this site in terms of the improvements to the athletic facility. One of the things that I think Dan spoke about was just the consideration, the actual retention of manicured lawn, given the use and the intensity of use of this facility was just not a feasible alternative. It would prevent the playability that the school is seeking in this program, so that was not pursued. We did contemplate a slightly larger facility given the nature of the existing landscape. We have just less than 10 acres of manicured lawn, playing fields. We look to see if maybe with the existing bathroom facility in the central portion of the site, the removal potentially of this bedrock knoll between the two fields, larger parking, larger field house. But we considered, after looking at that and relative to the landscape and the existing resources, we decided to pull back on that because we essentially wanted to advance a program that would largely respect our existing limits of disturbance. And that's what we're looking at this evening. Similarly, we looked at the potential, especially in this northern 400 feet of Greenwich Creek, or East Brothers Brook, otherwise known as, given the elevation, the existing elevation, and the fill material of the playing surfaces to the west and the east on both sides of this creek, and then the nature of the vegetation along the creek itself here with the dominance of the porcelain berry and the knotweed, there was a tendency from the engineering staff to encase this portion of the creek, fill it over, and enlarge the playing surface here. Obviously, if we had done that, there would have been a mitigation component in terms of creation, perhaps at the down gradient end of the creek. But looking at the regulatory climate in town and the nature or the function of this existing resources, again, with the impetus to maintain our limits of disturbance to the greatest extent practicable, we decided to avoid pursuit of that alternative as well. So what we're looking at tonight is we do believe does represent the most feasible and prudent alternative to address the school's desire for advancing the athletic program, as well as maintaining our existing function to the watercourse and adjacent wetlands. In terms of mitigation, we did consider and have proposed mitigation in a few areas on the property, one of which are the installation of native plantings, particularly in the northern edge, so where woodland is proposed to be disturbed, particularly the 0.18 acres in the northern edge of the field, the southwestern corner of the southern field, and along, obviously we have a rain garden here. We're proposing a variety of native shrubs in any area where we are proposing where woodland encroachment will take place. Additionally, the school has agreed to pursue the non-native vegetation eradication along that 400 linear feet of Greenwich Creek on both sides, north of the footbridge. This will be accomplished through the removal mechanically of the porcelain berry and the Japanese knotweed with some spot herbicide as necessary. And then we're looking to revegetate and restore this vegetated condition with native plants. Ideally, or as we described, looking at whips of pussy willow and elderberry, which will be positioned along the creek. And there's a 3-year monitoring protocol that is included in the proposal and written about in the impact assessment. I think that at this point this evening, we have received a number of comments from you just today and some DPW comments at the end of last week. We do understand and acknowledge that we have some work to do here, but we are committed to advancement of this plan and feel that it does represent a project that is consistent with your regulations in that it does not adversely impact the wetlands or watercourses on the subject property. I think at this point we'll conclude our presentation, and we'd be happy to turn it over to you for questions. Sure.
So in your assessment of Greenwich Creek, you determined that the creek had no educational value. Where does that come from, especially on a school property?
So I have to say that when you're looking and you're completing obviously everything has educational value.
This is on a school property.
But look at, but that was we're looking at the highway methodology supplement and working through the existing functions and values. Currently, an existing value, it's not currently used as a laboratory. It's not currently used as a study. However, it certainly demonstrates the potential to be utilized for that. There would be a really great study that could be accomplished through the monitoring and establishment of the non-native thing. Well, that was an existing value, and I look at this as: is it existing? Is it a near site? Is it an existing? Is there existing research taking place?
Did you check with the science department? Did they ever come down here?
It's not to my. I'm not aware of that.
Did you check?
I've not been in touch with the science department, but I haven't seen.
You actually don't even know.
I respectfully, yes, that is correct.
And you
However,
said that there was no visual or aesthetic value.
well,
How is that possible?
so I think what we're getting into is subjective values, and personally, to me, as a scientist who does appreciate a myriad of aesthetic interests that wetlands intrinsically provide, given the dominance of the non-native vegetation along the creek, as well as the filled floodplain on either side. Personally, to me, I did not see the visual quality was not as prominent as other systems. I understand your point that suburban watersheds or watercourses have intrinsic, every watercourse has an intrinsic visual quality. But
It's not
again,
like there's tires and carts and debris and concrete
Okay.
sides. Your report is the report on record, so I have to, where I see something needs to be challenged, I got to challenge you on it.
yeah, that's fine. I respect that completely, and I understand where you're coming from there. And I'll know in the future your level of aesthetic
And you
interests.
also had indicated there was no habitat value beyond the finfish.
Well,
Yet there's habitat. There are.
that was a prime. So I'd also like to just, with respect again, qualify that we're looking at primary values and primary functions here. And so I think that what was acknowledged within the report was the finfish and shellfish habitat, as well as the production export. So obviously there's going to be some level of trophic level cascading given the production export component. So wildlife habitat, and again, in every wetland, it's intrinsic. There's an intrinsic
But your
component to it
report says
as a
no.
primary value, as a primary function. That's
I would even argue as a primary function. I mean, this has got to be
Okay.
a perennial watercourse. Where would you expect the terrestrial
It was-
wildlife
so-
to go to feed on?
well,
aquatic
terrestrial
insects?
wildlife.
Well,
I
you've got
think
two different sections in your report. One
Right.
focused on finfish and one has a little
Well,
duck icon.
right. So I think that I understand where you're coming from here. And again, I'm looking at primary functions, and given the confined nature of the watercourse, the disconnected floodplain for the majority of the length, it wasn't identified as a primary function. Again, I haven't had this level of interaction with you specifically, so I understand where you're coming from, and I'll certainly be able to incorporate these comments more appropriately in the future.
And you determined that the loss of additional almost 2 acres of buffer around that isolated wetland was of no consequence to the wetland?
No, that wasn't, so there's not 2 acres, there's not 2 acres of loss of any buffer. We're looking at collectively in total
Well, I did rough
of
calculations
1.09 acre.
of the parking lot, the rain garden, and the intrusion of the other parking lot into the upland review area of that isolated wetland. And again, I had to rough it because the information wasn't
Right.
concisely provided, so
Mhm.
plus or minus,
Sure.
totally plus or minus. But I don't understand how you come to the conclusion that an additional nearly 2 acres of woodland adjacent to this wetland is of no consequence to that
Okay.
wetland.
Two things, is that it's we're looking at a total new disturbance of 1.09 acres. So we're not looking at 2 acres of disturbance around that isolated wetland. The isolated wetland is 2,000 square feet, so
Yeah,
it's
so
quite.
in the 100-foot
Right.
regulated area is how many?
So in the 100-foot upland review area to that wetland, we're looking at .79 acres of disturbance. But that includes the creation of the rain garden. That
Which
includes.
is, and I'll challenge you any day that cutting down woodlands adjacent to a wetland to create a rain garden is not the
So
intent.
well, the woodland there, I mean, we're looking at, you can see the landscape position of here, not to mention we're chipping out asphalt to create the rain garden as well. We're not looking at, this is not a robust, structurally complex forest that lies adjacent to this effectively stormwater wetland right on the edge of Cardinal Road. This is a thin woodland that's dominated by a very, basically moderate canopy, cloaked with vines, with a minimally developed shrub layer. We're not looking at a great deal of a protection of that wetland from that buffer. However, with the installation of the rain garden, I mean, we're effectively creating a situation where we have
I would like you to provide the documentation that substantiates removing woodlands adjacent to a wetland and placing a parking lot is beneficial to that wetland.
Well, I'm not saying the parking lot is beneficial. I'm saying that
You're
the
saying that
creation
there
of
was
the.
no impact to this wetland.
Right. I agree.
By putting a parking lot where woods now exist.
We're not draining to this wetland, for one, and we're screening
So
the.
draining isn't everything.
Correct. No, what I'm saying is that at the end, when this is all done and everything's built out, this wetland will be functioning in the same manner as it exists today. And that's how it's written. That is the purpose of
I respectfully
the.
disagree.
Okay.
The woodlands, a parking lot can never equal woods.
I'm not saying that it does. I'm just saying that given that small area and the small wetland and the hydrology and the
Relative to
maintenance
the
of
amount
hydrology.
Upland review area that you're taking from
Yeah.
this small wetland, it's significant.
Okay.
Proportionally significant.
I respectfully disagree.
Right, but in fact, you could make the parking area smaller.
That is something that we
and
could consider.
reduce the impact, and you could even improve the aesthetics of that wetland. Rather than putting in a rain garden, perhaps you improve the woodland that we've been talking about.
We'll consider.
So that there are other alternatives. I just had a question relative, I guess that's a football field #2.
Well, this area is sort of
Yeah.
the stadium field, yes?
Yeah, can that be placed where the baseball diamonds are now? And get over there, yeah, and have it run east-west and pull it away from the street in all regards?
This area is quite a bit lower than where we're speaking of here. I mean, we're looking at, there's a 7-foot drop total between the northern edge of the playing field and then the bridge on Cardinal Road. This area is periodic, I mean, it's, not to mention you're going to be, you might be pulled away from the stream, but you have the stream, remember that we're now taking a sharp turn.
Yes.
So you're going to have stream on both sides
Yes.
in this direction.
Yes.
So I wouldn't look at that as an improved condition to what's proposed now, especially given the amount of earthwork that you'd need to pull this up.
Why would you have
But
to
again,
pull
we
it up?
can, well, you'd need to raise it up. Because it's quite low. It's quite low, and
It's
you,
also the floodplain.
that's in
This is where I get confused, because floodplain soils are wetlands.
Alluvial soil.
alluvial are.
Well-
Not every bit of soil in a floodplain is a wetland. It's alluvial soil. So what we're looking to do is we're working within the flood fringe, which is not prohibitive. As long as our calculations that we work through on the HEC-RAS modeling demonstrate that we're not increasing base flood elevations by that certain amount as prescribed by the DPW, working in the flood fringe, particularly in a manicured lawn area, is
That's an engineering criteria, not an ecological one, is that correct?
that's correct. But yes, we can get into that at some point. Yes, that is correct. Sure.
One question. So, I mean, the issue with moving, and we looked at all sorts of things on how we situate and best fit things. The school has a baseball program, so if we eliminated this baseball field, they'd have no baseball
No,
field.
put the baseball field where the football field is.
I'm not sure how that's going to make
But then
anything
it'll
any
take the
better.
football field, it'll give you more of a buffer around the field relative to the stream.
This baseball field would still be fairly large, and we would still have a football
You
field
could-
right
you
up
could
to the
put
fringe
you
of
could
the
put
creek.
the stadium seating further to the south, you wouldn't need all that parking that's at the north end there.
But we would still have a field that we'd be putting right at the edge of the
Turn your
creek.
hand the other way.
But we would have it, the creek runs here.
Right,
So we'd
would
have
be
it,
parallel, the field would be parallel to the long side of the creek. It wouldn't be the same way it is now, rotated 90 degrees.
which you don't want it, you want a soccer, football field, they should be located northeast for spectator, for solar reasons. So it's not something that would be at all advisable to locate the field in this direction. It would be against kind of typical siting of rectangular fields.
But how would it affect the wetlands?
Well, I don't see the benefit, in all honesty, of putting the field here and putting another field here. We're going to have, on this side, we're going to be building around where we have 3/4 of the field surrounded by the creek. We're going to be having the exact same disturbances. And in this area, we really couldn't put this field here because this is floodway, floodplain. We cannot raise, regulatory-wise, we cannot raise the grade in that location.
Are there existing playing fields at the Stanwich School at its campus?
There are existing fields. I believe they are improving some of their fields there, too, to make way for their programming. Yes.
Are there fields
I'd
in
like
the
to
upper-
know quite a bit more about those fields and the feasibility of using them more extensively to take off the pressure from this area.
Yeah,
Can
they're
you provide that information?
Sure, yeah, they're looking kind of wholesale at how the entire program functions. So they're looking at, where my loan room is not specifically, but we could certainly, if that's germane to this discussion, then we can,
It's a possible alternative, that's why I ask.
sure,
I think we should provide it.
Two questions. Are there fields at the upper campus here?
yes, there are.
So how many baseball fields will
There's 0 baseball
the
fields.
school end up with when it's finished?
It's
Between here and
these
Stanwich?
fields here.
That's it?
These are their fields, yeah. These are their baseball
What
fields.
are the fields at the upper campus?
They're non-regulation, so it's appropriate for K through 9. Once you get to the high school level, where you're competing, and these fields are designed at the private school level. They compete at NCAA regulation sizes, so those fields would not be regulation size up on the upper campus.
And my last question is, Ms. Reynolds, what would your recommendations be? Did I get the remove? Raymond, I'm sorry. That's my middle name. What would your recommendations be to improve the aesthetics of that street?
Well, I think what we're doing in terms
Beyond
of...
what you're doing?
Okay, beyond what we're doing. Beyond what we're doing.
Yes.
Well, we have essentially, well, I'll start with what we're doing will improve in terms of the removal of the non-native vegetation. I mean, I think that one of the things that we could look at perhaps potentially, I think that streams that have a lot of dead structure that allow for oxygenation of water are a little bit more aesthetically appealing to me than stagnant or just less diversity of flow. So I think some dead structure could be helpful in certain areas, certain key areas. Obviously, that's work within the wetland boundary, and we have not, other than a temporary
Well, I wouldn't approve it solely for it. I wouldn't disrupt things solely for an aesthetic purpose. I think there's degradation there, that there's mitigation opportunities beyond getting rid of the invasive stuff.
Okay.
You know, I think it's a really good vein of question, and I'd love to think about it a little bit more closely and come
Fine.
back with you with some opportunities. for
Sure.
this. Is that possible?
That's certainly possible.
Okay, great.
I have a question for you also. Of the invasive plants that you mentioned, you didn't talk about, I think, this Buttercluckus aurunculus, which is really vicious and really, really, really hard to remove.
Right.
And I didn't hear anything about how you would propose to remove that plant. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
How you would remove it from the banks of the stream without disturbing the stream and
Right.
having the roots
A
and the
lot of
little
erosion.
nodes float downstream and so
Right.
on. It's big.
It
And I
is.
didn't hear you address it at all. So
So
I'm curious about that.
We did, and I could touch on this because I will see you, I think, in a few weeks. We can get into more specifics, but we addressed it in the report in terms of an approach of both mechanical and chemical. But with the porcelain berry, what we would do to begin with would be mechanical. So essentially, what we're going to be doing is identifying the actual root systems of each of these, and they're tendrils. It's a vine.
The aurunculus is more complicated, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Played a role in trying to remove
Okay.
it. It's bad.
Well, we have a combination of chemical and mechanical removal that we would be implementing over the course of the 3-year
It's
monitoring
just
period.
something that I would like to have.
Yeah,
a
we
little
can write a
information
more
on.
specific protocol for you on that.
Can you speak to the history of the impacts to the floodplain and why completely eliminating the floodplain from this watercourse is beneficial to the watercourse? Not in the baseball field area, in this, the
Right.
turf, yeah.
I think that, we're not, what we're saying is that, and what we have been saying, and it's documented with the modeling, is that the work that's being proposed within the flood fringe is not going to affect, particularly the stormwater management proposed, but we're not affecting the hydrology or the functionality of the watercourse. We're not saying that what's proposed is necessarily beneficial, but what we're saying is it's not going to impose an adverse impact.
Can you review what the functions of a floodplain are relative to a watercourse?
Certainly, the work we're looking at is potential for overbank flow, for storage, for attenuation. In some situations, you do have a beneficial function relative to sediment and toxicant reduction. You could have nutrient assimilation depending upon the nature of the vegetation within the floodplain. In these particular floodplains, what we're looking at is managed with lawn. So what we're seeing is it's a physical, it would be a physical feature as opposed to a real biological relationship in this particular area.
So it serves no biological function at this point.
It's moderate, it's minimal. We're not looking, it's not being considered to be a river with a really connected floodplain. And what we're seeing.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree at all that this floodplain has been impacted.
Yeah, there's.
But I don't think that this past impact should be capitalized on to do away with it completely. Even a minimal biologic impact has benefit.
Right.
And this is now going to be wiped out 100%.
I wouldn't go, 100% is a little, I wouldn't go that far. I think that yes, we do need to propose the retaining walls along the western edge of the field to protect the field surface. But again, this is not an extremely, let's run through the model, what's being proposed is not affecting the overall carrying capacity of.
That's an engineering consideration.
But I think that's important here too, because the biological component is manicured lawn, so what we then are looking at is the engineering component. And again, working in the flood fringe and working in the floodplain is not prohibitive. It's not prohibitive. The actual floodplain here is not a wetland. It's not a wetland. A portion of this floodplain is within your upland review area, but it's not a wetland here. Our charge is to manage and maintain the functions of the wetlands and watercourses on the property. And the floodplain is
largely outside of that on this particular site. We're looking at the top of bank as the limit of the wetland. The relationship between your floodplain and your wetland, you're not having a lot of hydrologic connection between the two. The hydrology of the wetland is driven by the creek proper, the actual area inside your top of banks and then riverward. So we're not seeing a great relationship and a great connectivity between these management lawn areas and the creek bed. So that's
It's not absent. And it will be absent.
I would disagree, but I see your, I think you were clear in your letter, and I think you'd like the opportunity to be able to provide some comments back to you in a more thoughtful, possible.
Do you want to go through your memo at this point, or do you think we've done enough?
I think that it's detailed enough that, and Megan only received it late this afternoon, so I think in fairness to the applicant, to let them go through and digest it.
Do we have any other comments from members of the agency? Do we have public comment on this application? No public comment on the Greenwich Country Day School application. This is a public hearing.
It is.
Mr. Clausen.
I'd like to make a correction for the record. In the regulated activities and site data sheet that I prepared on April 18th, I misstated that this is East Brothers Brook. It's actually West Brothers Brook. So,
Do I need a motion to continue? Yeah, a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May 20th is our next, it's off kilter because of Memorial Day holiday. So we're the third Monday.
Two extra years.
Oh, goody. I'll drive by your house and drop it on the lawn.
Okay, I guess the next up is 2019-017-16 Lakeview Drive, Egni, Lennon, and Slane for Mariano Lozano.
The applicant requested that this be postponed to the next agency meeting.
Very good. 2019-032, 184 Bible Street, reconstruction of single-family residence. This has been postponed as well.
Yes, the request of the applicant?
Okay. 2019-035, 16 Walsh Lane, Frangione Engineering for Alexandra and Cassandra Carnell for construction of a cabana.
okay, this property was redeveloped under approval of a permit issued in 2011. At that time, a pool was constructed, pool equipment was installed to the south of the pool, and a rain garden was installed to the south of the pool equipment. The applicant, so I'll point, the applicant now would like to take the pool equipment and shift it to the east, build a little cabana with a walkway, stairway down from a somewhat expanded pool patio. The edge of wetland is quite close here. None of the activities are proposed in the wetland. The entire area behind the house down to the watercourse where the pipe daylights in this location is maintained as lawn. This is a condition that the agency approved back in 2011. The watercourse banks and the southern portion of the wetland that's off this plan a little bit have been enhanced with plantings back as part of that 2011 permit. Looking at this, I think it's a pretty minor activity. Access it will either be from the garage motor court around the east side of the pool, or perhaps along the edge of the wetland here from the west. Erosion controls installed will be all that's needed to protect that wetland during the project, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Very well.
Good evening. For the record, Rob Frangione with Frangione Engineering. We have no objection to any of the conditions of the approval, and I'm here to simply answer any questions should you have them.
Any comments from the agency? No? Any comments from the public? No? You have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Norma seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
2019-036, 46 Meadow Road, Rocco B. Deandra, Inc., for Amy Cohen and John Hartig for reconstruction of a single-family residence.
All right. Back last November, the agency issued a permit authorizing some residential additions and minor renovations to the existing house here at 46 Meadow Road in Riverside. Since that time, the property owner has decided. Pardon?
I'm sorry. It's just that Deandra was here, but now he seems to have
I
disappeared.
think he might be in the hall. Thank you.
I'm not going to give any information that's not in the staff report, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see what's on here first. Yes. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
A lot of people waiting in, sitting outside waiting. Do you have an introduction yet?
Yes. Starting in.
Bob
just
still
about-
wants for his report.
I was just about to say that since the prior permit was issued, property owners have decided that they'd rather, for a variety of reasons, build a new house. And the new house they want to build is actually going to be further from the wetlands than the existing house and specifically the additions that the agency approved back in November. The driveway, which is currently, I'm going to go up here on the east side of the house, is now going to be relocated further from the wetland, over on the west. There's a stormwater management system, which was not part of the prior approval because that was drainage exemption, as you know, the additions didn't amount to more than 1,000 square feet. And the drainage design has been designed to reduce peak runoff rates through the 25-year storm. Comments from the DPW Engineering Division received since the staff report was written point out some revisions that are required, but again, these are revisions that are not serious enough for the agency to need to see. There is a condition in the permit that requires their DPW final sign-off before site work can begin, so we will get that those minor things straightened out before the site is worked on. There is a restoration plan for the wetland and buffer to the west of the brook. Mr. DeAndrea's flipped that. That's right over here, and some restoration here as well, because of the house is being pulled quite a bit further from the watercourse that runs there to the north. There's going to be a slightly enhanced buffer with some screening plantings and overall getting further from the wetland. let's see, the only thing I would say is that the perimeter erosion controls around especially the east side of the house ought to be reinforced in some way. A single line of silt fencing, it's a pretty tight site, and a single line of silt fencing probably not going to cut it. But other than that, I would recommend the agency issue a permit for this application.
Thank you. We concur with Bob's assessment. We can and will strengthen the S&E along the stone line channel and address the minor comments from DPW. We do have a permeable pavement on the western side. We have found a seam of gravel across the front, so we separated the two lid components to satisfy the drainage manual. And as Bob pointed out very clearly, we did move it up forward. It was kind of forced by a zoning compliance issue, but as a result of having to meet that criteria, they decided to rebuild the home. Their initial intent was to remodel and live in that home, but it didn't work out that way, so hopefully you would concur.
Comments from the agency? Any public comment on this application?
Motion to approve.
Second. There's somebody with a hand.
I'm sorry, please step forward.
So, thank you. So I've done it, and I live
No, please step to the microphone, yes. We're very formal.
Thank you. And one of the things that we agreed to with the owners was, since we are to the north of them on Hidden Brook Road, and the brook behind them is mainly on our property, the question we had was, currently the drainage pipes from the sump pump, which there are 2 or 3, they drain on the property line, but the water runs over our property to the brook. And one of the questions we had was, when they're going to build the new house, and they have the new drainage system, which I just heard there's going to be something in the front, and I don't really understand what that means. Are there going to be pipes that actually take runoff from the house, or if there's a sump pump from the basement, and puts that into the brook? And at what point on the property does it go into the brook? We just have a concern. We just don't want the water to come, the pipe to end at the property line, and then the water go across the land, our property, into the brook on our side. So I would just like a confirmation as to how that's going to work. Thanks.
Mr. Yan, address that, please.
I will say that Mr. Donovan had a lot to do with the relocation of the home. There are existing pipes that discharge into the brook. Those are representative of the footing drains that are there. All the roof drains and the driveway drains are being directed into the new systems. So we have permeable pavement on the west under the driveway, which takes the majority of that driveway and a portion of the roof. And ultimately, after that water is dissipated into the ground through the gravel seam, if there is an overflow, it comes to a level spreader. Now that's been drawn back from the edge of the watercourse. There is one pipe that exits into the watercourse approximately here on our property, and we intend to maintain that discharge for the footing drain.
So there won't be any more drainage across?
Correct. Not across the property.
Thank you. Now, Norma second.
Second it.
Second the second.
Oh, I did. Sure, make it a third.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 2019-038, 37 Baldwin Farms North, William Kenny Associates for 37 Baldwin Farms North. Remedy for clearing and grading adjacent to a wetland.
I'd like to note that members Benton, Condolf, and Curlin were at the site today. Sorry.
Okay, so the property owner was cited for a violation on the property that included unauthorized clearing of trees and vegetation, chipping of a large outcropping, and using the material to grade a slope within 5 feet of a wetland. The wetland consists of a woody swamp that meanders with a watercourse through it on the western third of the property. The affected area is about 100 feet by 160, and it's located on the southwestern part of the property. The applicant's proposing to restore the disturbed wetland buffer by installing trees and shrubs. Comparing the topography to a previously approved permit plan for permit 2018-40, the current site conditions appear to indicate that fill remains on the property. Given the pre-existing outcropping and steep slopes, fully restoring the grade may not be possible. However, the areas of the disturbed wetland within about 50 feet of the wetland should be restored to pre-violation grade. The remaining 50 feet of the upland review area should be restored as much as is practical. A revised plan addressing this issue was submitted late this afternoon that Bill Kenny will later review with the agency. When removing the fill, care should be taken around affected trees in the effort to preserve them. During removal of the fill, a certified soil scientist or another professional should be on site to monitor the removal of the fill to ensure that there's minimal disturbance to the wetland. Once the fill is finally removed, the area should be resurveyed to ensure that the pre-grade topography has been restored. The new as-built survey should be submitted to agency staff for review and approval prior to implementing the plantings. There was a question as to whether fill had been brought into the site. The owner has indicated that none has been brought in. The agency should consider whether the wetland would benefit from a demarcation feature at the 100-foot upland review area. This demarcation could potentially tie into the previously approved retaining wall that is located about 85 feet east of wetland flag 33, and this would prevent further encroachment into the wetland in the future. It's approximated that 15 trees, ranging in size from 12 to 32 inches in diameter, and an unknown number of shrubs and other vegetation was removed from the wetland and the buffer located in the rear part of the property. The owner is proposing the replacement of 55 shade trees, 18 understory trees, 75 shrubs that will restore the disturbed buffer areas. The number and sizes of these plantings are acceptable. There was a previous permit that authorized the construction of a septic system, walls, and filling 37 feet from the wetland. An as-built plan was reviewed during an office meeting discussing the site remediation, but it hasn't been submitted as part of this application to date. The plan indicated that the stone wall that was constructed, that was previously approved, was constructed closer to the wetland than was originally authorized, and so the applicant should speak to this. It's recommended that the agency delay taking action on this application to give the applicant a chance to respond to these questions and any questions that the agency members may have. But conditions have been provided if the agency is prepared to issue an order.
Mr. Cutie. Bill Kenny, William Kenny Associates, soil scientist, landscape architect, wetland scientist, here representing the owner, and he's directed me to comply with the requests that Doreen has put forth, and we're in agreement with the recommended conditions. Today, it took us, when we first submitted the restoration plan, we didn't have the as-built survey yet to show how the grades had changed. So we submitted a plan that had all the plantings to meet your deadline. And then subsequent to that, once we got the as-built, I met with Doreen, went over what she'd like to see with the grading, and we put together this new drawing. On the left, you have the planting plan. On the right, or in the center of the drawing, you have a grading plan. The first comment that Doreen has is she makes a recommendation to restore grades within about 50 feet of the wetland. So that's, we're showing restoration of the grades within that 50 feet. And in order to achieve that, there'll be 2 rows of retaining walls where the rock face used to be. So we're essentially recreating the vertical element of that bedrock face with native stone from the site to create these walls, and then replanting everything within 100 feet of the wetland to the quantities and sizes that Doreen has recommended. We are agree to the monitoring that's requested, agree to the demarcation feature at the 100-foot mark. The owner has, I'll get a letter from him stating that the filling that occurred resulted from cutting on site and just moving the material on site to where he put the fill in, and that he did not import fill in order to achieve the grades that are shown on the drawing. So it's pretty much it. We tried to address Doreen's comments and are in agreement with the recommended conditions.
Can you speak to the, Doreen reference that the retaining wall is approved at 37 feet, isn't at 37 feet?
Yes. If you'd like, I can give you copies of the drawings of this drawing. Would you like that right now? Yeah. Retaining walls that are shown on the grading plan in the center of the drawing. One is a gray, just a gray fill. And the other is in the northern portion of the property is more of a rock graphic. The one in the northern portion of the property is the waterfront fill. And I would say this piece was approved, and what was approved previously, I think, is something so that it was moved forward about 12 to 15 feet. It's not within the 50-foot zone that was requested to restore grades to. So we were able to show the grading restored within that 50 feet, keeping that wall.
So the wall, which I assume is the limit of lawn, is now moved closer
Although-
to the wetland.
You can see that wall, there's still planting a buffer.
What's the likelihood of that buffer? I think it's
If
a
you'd
bad.
like us to move that wall, I think we do.
That wasn't moved.
It's a good amount closer to the wetland than it should be, so, yeah. It should be relocated.
Put it back to where it was approved initially.
Okay. So then we have to add a special condition indicating that the wall is to be removed.
A final construction drawing that indicates that the wall will be relocated. Yes.
Which would go in special condition number 1. Okay. Do you have any comments from the agency?
It's a good idea. Just a comment from the board. The demarcation feature, do we have to add that?
No, there's a condition for that. Yes, already there.
Okay, are there any comments from, if we have a comment?
Sure.
Number 3, yes.
And it's on the board here.
Could you identify yourself?
I'm Nancy Marshall. I'm the adjoining neighbor at 297 Round Hill Road. I would say I probably have more of a property line adjoining this than anybody else. And I'd like to begin by saying I think this property represents a complete breakdown of the system, starting with the fact that the owner, who should have noticed the neighbors and apparently even recorded at the Wetlands Agency that they had noticed the neighbors of what was going to happen, did not notice us. We did, to be fair, we did receive notice from Mr. Kenny here about the remediation, but that was a little late in the game for us to even understand that a variance was being requested with respect to this property. I wish that you all could see a photograph of what has been done to this hillside, the entire place. Every tree has come down. Last year, starting in March, every single day, for Monday to Saturday, beginning literally at 8 o'clock sharp. The people would arrive at 7:30. I would hear the construction people, but the jackhammering would begin at 8 o'clock every day and go throughout the entire day, every day except for Sunday. This happened through November. My understanding is that the agency is supposed, this is not something that happened overnight, the chipping away of the ledge. It's something that took months and months and months of daily activity. And my understanding is there's supposed to be periodic monitoring of what is happening at the property. I actually asked Wetlands, and it turns out there was no monitoring during this time, because if there had been, somebody would have seen long before this property was destroyed that it was being destroyed. Right now, I can't even, it's a completely precipitous drop from the top of the house to the ground. It's pretty much, if it were a ski slope, it would be a double black diamond. There's just the notion that plants in its current state could even begin to take root in the soil is just ludicrous. I understand. I was going to suggest that there needed to be a new survey before any landscape plan could actually be designed, because the contours today are obviously completely different than they were before, when this was just a forested property. We used to just look out on forest, and it's just a completely blasted open site. I mean, the notion right now that the owner is going to make a representation that the fill didn't come from wherever the fill didn't come from, to me, is just kind of an absurd notion, because this is an owner that didn't notice what he was about to do with the property, proceeded to destroy it for 9 months, just brazenly defying what he had submitted that he was going to do in his application, and now we're simply going to take his word. I don't understand. I mean, I don't know if there's any heightened level of scrutiny. I understand that the enforcement mechanisms are just about nil from Wetlands and what can be done, and obviously the remedy at this, as was said in the application, it can never be restored. But since describing what happened here to people around town, basically the response I've gotten is there are two standards. One is for residents and one is for builders, and it just seems that the bottom line is the builders seem to understand that they can completely ignore plans that they submit, they can completely ignore what the regulations are, and that the consequences will be minimal as they are. I mean, in terms of repair happening to this, it's just, it will never begin to make up for what's happened. And speaking as the adjoining property owner, even without having destroyed the land, as these people did, it's very difficult for plants to take root there. We've planted nine trees in the past several years on our property, and 3 of them have actually taken. That's without this precipitous drop. This is just talking about the soil. So a beautiful plan of 75 this kind of tree, 35 of that, my guess is 3 to 6 months after these are planted, probably 2/3 of them aren't going to survive. That's before the property was, had this assorted alien whatever introduced into it, before it was destroyed. So I'm just baffled that this kind of thing can happen in town. And I mean, obviously your concern is not what I am looking out on now. Your concern is not that for 2 years I've had absolutely no use of the outdoors of my property, which is what I moved there for. I understand that your concern is the wetlands, but I think that just complete lack of concern that the owner showed for every rule and regulation and sign of just common decency in building this property does bear upon what they're going to do to remediate the actual wetlands concerns there. If they can so brazenly disregard every other rule, there's just no reason to suggest that they're going to comply with this. I don't know. I understand there's certain monitoring protocol for 3 to 5 years to see what happens with plants. I don't know if there's an elevated level, a heightened scrutiny, something to say that this person's on notice, that they're being watched more closely because they got away with murdering a property here. So, and I'd really ask that be addressed if there even is a heightened sort of protocol after the fact in a case like this.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Is it possible just to explain in more detail what steps you will take to make sure that the planting survives and so on?
So when a planting plan is installed, there's an inspection at
In this case, it's 50%.
50% of that value has to be posted with the county. That starts the clock once the plantings are in and it's described the date, because this is a violation when those plants have to go in. There'll be a date when that stone wall has to be moved back to what it was approved originally. There is normally a 2-year period in which we hold the bond and conduct inspections. A plan is considered successful after the end of the 2-year period, provided 80% of the material that was planted is priced. And it's incumbent upon the person who did the planting, the property owner, the watering, weeding, deer protection, all of that is the responsibility to be sure that that plant is thriving, 80% of the material is thriving after 2 years. Well, that's, they don't get to actually do that cost-benefit analysis, because if they don't do what is required of them by virtue of the order of this agency, if they say, keep the 50%, I don't really care, we take them to court, and then a judgment is produced. Yeah. Oh, I hear your frustration, I feel your frustration, I do.
Any other public comments? Do I have a motion?
Motion to issue an order to correct with the special conditions listed.
For the modification to condition 1?
And, yeah, with the additional modification for the wall to the originally approved location.
Do I have a second? Norma seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
You're welcome to call the agency whatever you want to. Okay. 5019-03929 Valley Drive, William Kenny Associates for Georgetown Owners.
Okay. All right, the property owners were cited for a violation on this property that includes unauthorized construction of a stone retaining wall with backfill along the pond bank at the front of building number 1 of the Georgetown North condominium. The applicant is seeking to maintain the wall and fill. There was an application in 2014 that was submitted for the purposes of constructing a retaining wall along the stream and the pond that included the length of the pond bank associated with this application. At the time of the review, alternatives to the retaining wall were requested since the area didn't appear to be subject to erosive water flows. The revised plan that was provided by SC Minor and certified by their engineer was under permit 2014-105. It approved the plan employing coir logs and plantings to shore up the slumping shore slope along the pond edge. Last summer, Director Sesto met on site with the representatives of Georgetown North and their landscaping manager to discuss the activities that could be done without needing a permit. In the discussion, it was authorized that they can hand stack any fallen rocks that had fallen along the pond bank. And they were further informed that any increase of the stone armoring or reworking of the pond banks would require a permit. And that's indicated in the field report that's dated June 26, 2018, that's attached to your staff report. As a result of the meeting, there was a green sheet that was signed off on as a declaratory ruling that did not require a permit for the site work and the landscaping involved. In December 2018, staff learned that an unauthorized retaining wall had been constructed along the front of building number 1 and that stone and fill had been brought into the site. Along with the corrective application that was submitted, we received a report prepared by Rizzoli Planning and Engineering that provided calculations addressing the erosive velocity of stormwater entering into the pond to support maintaining the wall and to ensure the structural stability of the pond edge and any nearby buildings. However, the report didn't include any drainage calculations to demonstrate that coir logs and plantings would not be as successful to shore up the bank. Further, the calculations are generic for the pond as a whole and do not establish the velocities that would directly impact the portion of the pond banks that are being discussed as part of this application. A review of the aerial photos from 1980, 2003, and a survey dated September 2014 shows relatively minor changes to the limit of the lawn due to erosion at the front of building number 1 over this period of time. Since a double row of coir logs and plantings were previously recommended by a licensed professional engineer, and that will provide a naturalization to the pond edge and stabilize the bank and reduce erosion, it's recommended that the wall and fill be removed and that the approved plan under permit 2014-105 be implemented. We will need a detailed erosion control plan to be submitted that protects the pond and the stream and the wetland during this construction. An issuance of an order is recommended with the conditions that are provided in the staff report.
Good evening, Bill Kenny for Georgetown North Homeowners Association condominium. We have met on a number of occasions with the staff to come to an agreement of a way to resolve this, and the Homeowners Association is anxious to resolve this and move forward and remove the wall and put in the coconut logs and do the plantings in accordance with the recommendations that Doreen has made. So, be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the agency?
No, let me do it.
We were there.
Okay.
The three of us.
The three of us were there.
Okay.
The Three Musketeers. Right. Do I have any public comment on this one? Do I have a motion?
So remove the new material that was brought in, stone and soil, and put in logs. There was some existing stone there, so if there's underlying stone, use that as a base and put the logs on that and build up from there. And what I recommend is, and maybe it's in here, I can't remember, do the removal, meet with staff to review those conditions before we start moving forward with installing the logs.
Sounds good. I have a motion.
So, all the conditions are correct, right?
Yes.
What you find the place. So, motion to issue an order to correct with the special conditions listed in the.
Second?
Second.
Okay, seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
54 Pexlin Road, Conti and Conti for James Walker to rectify their order.
Everything neatly arranged. Nothing.
Okay, so this property owner was also cited for a violation that includes extensive disturbance in the installation of an earthen berm to support evergreen trees to the wetland on the southern part of the property. Prior to the work, the wetland had been maintained primarily as lawn. The property owner stated that a previous homeowner installed a catch basin, drainage pipes, and a pump into the wetland to drain ponding water. The owner would like to install enhancement plantings to improve the values and functions of the wetland and to maintain the previously installed drainage system. a history of the site. In the early to mid-2000s, there had been litigation between two neighbors to the west, 167 and 175 Zacchaeus Mead Lane, regarding property damage that had resulted from impacts from stormwater runoff that included flooding within the wetland at 54 Peckland Road. The end result was a permit that was issued in 2004 that included drainage improvements, but it did not include drainage improvements for 54 Peckland Road. Current application documents state that the existing catch basin and pump system was likely installed in 2008. The work was reportedly done to replace a drainage system that had previously been crushed. In July 2008, a letter was issued by staff to the property owners of 54 Peckland Road, who is not the current property owner, acknowledging that pumping stormwater from one location of the property to another, that they were doing this, but disallowing the discharge to an off-site wetland prior to being infiltrated on the subject property. As a result, the drainage pipe had been pulled back to be retained on the subject property. This letter acknowledged that pumping was a temporary solution to alleviate flooding being experienced by the homeowners. However, it didn't authorize a permanent drainage structure within the wetland or the buffer. The end result of these occurrences is that drainage on 54 Peckland Road was installed as a permanent resolution to ponding within the wetland without any permits being issued. Currently, the pumping system releases water to an area east of the swimming pool. The receiving water is exhibiting gullies and erosion. To alleviate this, the water should outlet to a level spreader. Plantings are being proposed in this location that will further stabilize and enhance the area. There are no wetlands in this particular area. The narrative states that the catch basin located within the wetland has a raised rim of about a ½ inch. This would allow a ½ inch of ponding in the wetland prior to entering the basin.
Doreen?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but you had pointed out that that was a ½ inch error. Those refer to feet, so when it says 91.2 as compared to 91.7, that refers to ½ a foot. So that's a 6 inch, not ½ inch.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a ½ inch.
There's a 6 inch lower area.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that correction to the report. Thank you. Excuse me.
So there is also, well then, I guess that takes care of that issue.
I thought so.
There was also an above-ground pump that's draining water from the southern side of the newly installed earthen berm through a hay bale before it enters into the catch basin. And the owner is proposing to maintain this drainage system. As mitigation, the owner is proposing to remove a garage that's currently located on the north and eastern edge of the wetland. They'll remove any fill or material from the wetland and restore the previous grades. Using lightweight rubber tracking machinery and plywoods or temporary tracking pads to minimize any disturbance to the wetland or the buffer. They're proposing to install a wet meadow grass within the wetland. Install 5 shade trees, 9 understory trees, 13 northern spruce trees, and 178 shrubs to restore and enhance the disturbed wetland buffer and wetland. They're also proposing installing a boulder demarcation along the undeveloped wetland buffer, and also install plantings at the location of the outlet to the east of the pool. That includes 1 understory tree, 6 spruce trees, 41 shrubs, and 19 ferns. All of these plantings meet or exceed the recommended sizes. Recommendations include removal of the berm and restoring the previous grades. That should be explicit on a revised plan. The above-ground pipe that drains water from the south side of the newly installed earthen berm should be removed. We already discussed the catch basin that has adequate ability for groundwater before entering into the catch basin to be in the wetland. We should receive a revised plan that details the demarcation feature and the level spreader. But overall, the proposed planting plan will be a great improvement to the current site conditions. It will enhance the functions and values of the wetland and the buffer. So it's recommended that an issuance of an order be recommended with the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Doreen. Mr. Conti?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I concur with the report, and we're prepared to comply and update the plans as requested. I think we have a good solution to a problem and ready to implement.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments for the agency? Does the public have anything to say? May I have a motion, please?
Motion to issue the special conditions.
You want to second it? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
That's right. Here we go. 2019-041, 11 Highcliff Road, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for Ogden Hammond. Construction of a residential addition.
Okay, well,
Mr. Clausen.
This is, if you look at the plans, it's a residential addition to the, let's see, we're going to call that the southeast of the house, replacement of the existing pool and cabana with a new pool house with a new pool and patio, some retaining walls, modifying the driveway, installing drainage to mitigate for the increased impervious coverage, and installing a new septic system. There's also a small patio next to the tennis court, and there's a propane tank that's located right at the head of the watercourse that's going to be removed. So this is a pretty interesting property. Swamp, marsh, wetlands to the east and the west, with this sort of ditch type thing in the back that is a watercourse. All of the activities are basically within the existing residential landscape envelope. The new pool and patio will be pulled away from this intermittent watercourse compared to the existing pool house. The drainage system is designed to reduce peak runoff rates and volumes through the 100-year storm. DPW engineering comments came in. I didn't see them until after the report was written. They do have some recommended revisions, but again, this is one of those cases where none of these are deal breakers for the agency proceeding on this application this evening. I do have a condition in the staff report that we get final sign-off from DPW prior to site work beginning. I just handed down a planting plan that I received, I guess I received it at the end of last week, but I only printed it out today. And as I said to Mr. Muller over an email, this is a very nice planting plan for the residential portion of the property, but it really doesn't do anything for the wetlands or that intermittent water course. The wetlands don't really need anything. The intermittent water course could use a little bit of help because their lawn, it's maintained as lawn on both sides of it. So I don't know whether Mr. Muller and his client have considered adding any mitigation in this area. I'd like to hear that tonight. The other thing I just noticed as I was handing out these plans, there's a note on this plan that said, deer fence to enclose entire property. And there are little circles all the way around the property. And I just noticed that that's also on the site development plan, but it's not on the application form as a proposed activity. It's not in the narrative as a proposed activity. And I missed it, so it's not in my staff report. I can't support a deer fence going through these two wetlands. I mean, these are swamps. I mean, marshy, swampy, water-filled wetlands. And, you know, there's a place for a deer fence around the residential portion of the property, I'm sure, but that perimeter deer fence, there's no way I was recommending approving that. So, I guess I'd like to hear what Mr. Muller has to say about the planting and now about this deer fence.
Good evening, everybody. Brian Muller, professional engineer, state of Connecticut, representing the client. Yes, it seems as though the client is okay with your recommendation for the deer fence, and that must have just come off. We must have just put that in from a landscaping plan. We probably discussed it. That's fine. We are willing to go around the wetlands. There's no need for it to go through the wetlands. He just wants to be able to protect his property. The wetlands can remain that way. As for the design, we were fortunate enough that, well, fortunate and unfortunate enough that he's had some issues out here that we currently don't have a CO on the property, so we were actually able to go with the old grade plane rules, which allowed 5-foot walls and only a 5-foot separation, because under the new rules in an RA4, those walls are only allowed to be 4 feet and they have to be separated by 15 feet. So right now we have 10 feet of grade change here, so you can imagine we'd have to add a third wall and have all three 15 feet apart. It just would never have worked, so we were fortunate in that aspect. As well as we pulled the pool and patio away from this watercourse wetland ditch here. As well as we are taking out some of these trees here. They are in bad condition. If anyone visited the site or will visit the site, these are in poor condition here. We made sure we added every little thing here so that we weren't trying to hide anything. The deer fence is basically the only oversight, I think. The DPW comments, we're going to be able to address those, no problem. That's not really a concern. As for the plantings around the ditch, I spoke with the landscape architect this morning. I didn't have a chance to speak with Ogden yet, but if you would like to talk about what you're willing to do around the watercourse here, by all means, you can come up and introduce yourself. Currently, it's all manicured lawn. We weren't really planning on adding any type of, or at least I wasn't planning on adding any type of wetland plants to that ditch, because to me it only really flows in this, like, not even really this time of year anymore. It's really just from the snow melt. Well, yeah, it was raining. You guys got lucky. Oh, did you? Oh, well, it also did rain Friday night very heavily, so that could still be draining the wetland from up top. This is a very unique site. It has wetlands on the high side and the low side. So with this,
I remember a lot of history about this site and the neighboring site to the east, but I don't really remember anything about the ditch.
It feels like it's a wetland down there, but the roots are heating up. And
yeah, there's high groundwater as you get close to the ditch here. That's why some of these trees
the
are.
wetlands haven't been re-examined.
No. I mean, there was question when we first did the application, when we did the first edition here, which I think was just a green sheet sign off. The questions came about for the B100 area, and we were even questioning whether we would consider this a wetland. And I think we came to the agreement that we would consider it a wetland because of how active it does drain this upper wetland down to, and connects to the lower wetland, so it had some type of conductivity to it, even though there's a pipe section of it. So that's why we maintained that classification. We didn't want to change it up. We were also pretty happy with how the flagging and the mapping that you guys had on record, so we thought that was sufficient enough. As for the ditch, would you be willing to maybe plant some meadow grasses? Or?
Ogden Hammond, property owner, 11 Highcliffe Road. I haven't had a chance to talk with our landscape architect about the comment that you made,
Came in this
Bob.
morning.
Yeah, but I'm happy to do that. We love that stream, actually. We think it's a feature of the property. I'd like to accentuate it in some way. I'm not quite sure exactly what that might look like, but I'm working with you and with
Yeah, and we
Chris,
can
I'm sure
also
we
work with staff as long as everybody's okay with us working with staff on how we would like to get that planted.
I mean, my sense is, I don't even think it has to be continuous planting. It could be, enhancing sort of the upper part of the ditch around there, and, where it gets tight around the back of your new pool. You've got a lot of plantings proposed, so maybe leave that, and then you've got some plantings at the lower end, maybe enhance that a little bit. So, just get it a little bit better, and else a lot better.
Okay, I think that's fair enough.
Do we need to make any changes to the special conditions?
Let's see, we had a 4,000. I mean, if it's, you could use I would just say a planting plan shall be worked out with staff approval and, well, yeah, I mean, the plan will be in there, and as far as a bond for it, I think if you're going to work with us on this, I don't really see it. I mean, it's likely to be a lot of herbaceous stuff and maybe a couple of trees or, accent plants that are also native. I was saying, all right. Okay.
Normal bond requirement, 30% of the total cost of the appraisal associated with mitigation.
Okay. Any other comments from the agency? Is there anybody?
No. You're it.
And I presume you have no comments? Okay.
Motion?
Yes, I want a motion.
Motion
I
to-
want a motion.
Motion to approve with the conditions listed, as well as adding a condition for the planting plan to be developed in conjunction with staff and an appropriate bond associated with that.
Second? Norma, second.
Is there any need for comment about the deer fence?
Say the deer fence shown on the plan is not part of the approval.
Yeah, we'll adjust it for final construction drawings.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Adjust it for testimony.
Yeah, adjust for testimony, yeah.
Okay.
And then the norm is that within 35 feet of 11. Do that as
And so the coyotes can get in. Anyway, okay, you accept the modification? In a second, right? All in favor?
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
We're not done yet. Cease and correct order 2019-006, 3 Knollwood Drive East. Who? It's on the agenda.
What's on the agenda? Oh, yeah. Me, too. I forgot my file, but that was, we're not contesting the cease and correct order. And then filed an application to correct it. So, uphold the cease and correct order.
Okay.
And this was discussed at the last meeting, the violation was described in connection with an application that was subsequently denied. And agency directed me to follow through the enforcement action. That was done.
Norma seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Whatever happened to 297 Congress?
21